were on that alleyway because I went to school in another district, blah, blah, blah. So it was kind of like insular in the beginning for me. And then I had this revolutionary experience where I moved to Bowen Island, and it was like a whole other world and an incredibly tight-knit community that was really supportive and kind of just turned my whole way of thinking around and has influenced me hugely. So I think that that's kind of where, when I realized the potential for what the impact on one single individual was when they were brought into a supportive community and an engaged and lively community with lots of arts and music and singing and hiking and just everything, name it. I kind of clued in that that was a good thing. And then since then, my journey has taken me back to, well, kind of lots of places in the world, and then back to North Vancouver to work on building community where I grew up, which I think is really interesting. So I work for the Edible Garden Project, which is a program of the North Shore Neighborhood House. And we do lots of really exciting things that most people don't know about. We have a half-acre farm just by Brooksbank Elementary, so we're growing and selling organic produce there. Anybody can stop by. It's on public parkland. We've got 12 other sites that are growing food. It's about a quarter acre that's growing food for donations to people in need in our community. And that's all grown by volunteers, and we hold lots of workshops and learning opportunities, do school programs. And a couple of things I've noticed in the last few years is I've worked here for 3 years, and we've gone from about 300 volunteer hours a year to 4,000. So there's a huge demand and interest from the community. People are like hungry for getting involved, and urban farming and gardening is really sexy. We didn't know. It's exciting. So we benefit from that, which is great. And we get comments from people that they've met more people volunteering with us in the summer season than they have living on their block for 10 years. So it's exactly what you were talking about. People get outside and they're gardening and they're eating fresh vegetables, and it's fun, and they talk to each other, and those walls all sort of break down.
Excellent. That sounds fabulous. Like building a sense of community is really nice. I'm going to start with you again for the second question, so we'll work our way backwards. So thinking through the lens of community and from the point of view of your work, what are some considerations that could be given to the development of Lot 5 and the Central Waterfront?
Sure. So people really like hands-on opportunities. So there are lots of examples around the world of fairly passive community like squares and centers, which I think we're not used to necessarily. So I think it's valuable to have some sort of interactive components in a public square, and gardens are a really easy way to do that because you can have the gardeners and you can have the people admiring flowers and vegetables and just viewing them as aesthetically pleasant. And you can host workshops there and use it as an interactive space. You could connect it with the market on Friday nights and be selling produce and vegetables, so there's sort of an economic piece. Yeah, so I think that there's lots of potential there for gardens to play a role in bringing people together to either help build the gardens or just admire them. And then Inspire, yeah. And then they can be beautiful, and they can be, there's lots of examples of temporary gardens like soul food. And movable garden pieces. So the whole lot would necessarily need to be a farm for it to still hold that value.
Excellent, thank you. Alex, how about you? Thinking through the lens of community and from the point of view of your work, what are some considerations that could be given to the development of Lot 5 in the Central Waterfront? And you have been there.
Yeah,
so
I've been
Lot 5,
there many
so you're
times.
familiar with it.
Yeah. You know, I wish I was one of you guys. It's definitely more sexy to be gardening than it is to be rewiring the wires behind the wall. But I think that one of the big drama in my life is that every time I explain what I do, people ask me if I'm going to install more solar panel on campus, and I have to explain to them that until the solar panels technology evolve to a next level, it doesn't make any financial sense for us to do it. It's way better to turn off the lights or to replace an old air conditioning system at the back of one of our mechanical rooms. And there's nothing sexy about it. So what we actually did is we did a photo exhibit. We hired a professional photographer, and he came and took pictures of compressors and pictures of all sorts of stuff. And we got the conversation going, and instead of talking about the artist or talking about the process, we talked about the piece of equipment behind the photo, and we said, this is how much we save by doing this very boring project, and this is how much it costs. And to save the same amount producing electricity with a solar panel, it would have cost 10 times more, 100 times more, 1,000 times more. And so until we're ready to go with all these cool technologies that are going to allow us to do business as usual, there are other things we should be doing. And so to me, if I was connected politically, I would try to get Energy 101 in all the classrooms so that people understand what energy is. And there's a student at BCIT who connected a bike to a little box with 100 watts light bulbs, and then to another box with CFL bulbs, and to get the light going you have to pedal. And you can turn the bulbs one by one, and so you put people on the bike and they bike for 100 watt bulb and they think they're in good shape, and you turn a second light on and suddenly it becomes more difficult, and then you turn a third light and so on, right? And then you do the same thing with energy efficient light bulbs and go on for an hour and not be sweating. Because energy is energy, no matter it's electrical or it's a calorie that you can get from food. Energy is energy, right? And so what I would like to see is education through using public spaces for education, where you get people to think about these things. The other analogy that I like to use, I sometimes drive my car and I sometimes bike. Well, when I bike, I look at the road and I say, how can I get where I want to go without having to climb any hill? And so I can go longer distance if I have to, but don't give me a steep hill. With my car, I go up and down, right? Because I'm not the one feeling it. The engine does. Maybe I pay more on gas, but I don't really notice. And I think if we could understand these things, how lucky we are to have access to fossil fuels right now and hydropower, we would all rethink the way we use energy at home and in the workplace. And so if we could find a way to create this education piece within any public space, in this case it could be Lot 5, it would be wonderful, because we would be less wasteful and we would just rethink how we do things.
So whatever we do there, we should line it with bikes so that people have a bike to power it.
We should just line it with bicycles powering all of our salad spinners that then
that would be
our salad. I have some. I really want to convert it to bike
so
power.
get people to give you a few calories.
I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, and there's I can see interaction between all.
Education. I think that's cool. That sounds really neat. Tyler, what do you think, thinking through the lens of community and from the point of view of your work, what are some considerations that could be given to the development of Lot 5 in the Central Waterfront?
Well, I've been engaged in this a long time, and so it's not really my work and the upcoming development of Lot 5, but more what's happened until now. And a lot of just being the neighbor of Lot 5 and kind of being other than Pinnacle Hotel, kind of the primary local business owner who happens to be affected by or the development of Lot 5. My role I have seen as just sort of like a business owner has been disciplining the process in some ways, and so when what can I say? I put forward all kinds of different proposals, and I've urged a particular way of going about the process. Ben Aldred asked me pretty much the same question a couple of years ago, and I'll just quote what I said then. He said, "What would you like to see there?" And I said, "Thoughtfulness. There's so much potential with that place, so much honor that's owed to it, and history that it holds. It's a colonized space. It's one with deep history and military-industrial complex, shipbuilding, international trade, things like that. It's a space that's provided livelihoods for people for generations, and is fundamentally First Nations territory. A lot of people go there for their contemplative space, and a lot of aspects and all of these aspects need to be integrated into the conversation of what's going on." And then as pretty much everyone here knows. You know, I was told that they were having conversations with people from the Great Canadian Casino to produce something a little more ugly down there, and you know, so kind of making sure that there's some kind of thoughtfulness that goes into the process of making that has really been what I've seen as partially my role, and so, you know, I invited, in 2010, I invited the city to use the Cafe for Contemporary Art as a site for contemplation and consideration of what to do with Lot 5. And because they were engaged with conversations that they were engaged in, they kind of went, no, and urged me in a very strong way to stop being critical in any way of anything that might be going on. And kind of just being sincere to myself and honest to myself has been really important to the process, and you know, helping to give life to the North Van Urban Forum and to kind of continue a conversation around what to do with Lot 5 has been important. And then coming on from here is like, while taking care of making sure that this is a community engaged process, it's interested in questions that are contemporary and like part of like how we consider how we interact with one another and who we are. And energy questions are huge, food questions are huge. Making sure that that kind of process is there is fantastic. And as an artist, I guess I'm very interested in process-based art, performance art, broad geographic projects, institutions as art. That kind of thing is what's interesting. I don't really care about, like, painting. Yes, there's some nice paintings, but like these are kind of the sort of things that I'm interested in. So when I hear this kind of like collaborative conversation going on, I like to encourage that, blah blah blah. That's just not fun. But yeah, that kind of thing, kind of facilitating that development as a cultural project.
So what we're doing right now is what you'd like to see.
So what we're doing right now is in large part what I'm interested in seeing.
Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to focus on groups of questions for each of you. So you each know the questions that I'm going to ask, so there shouldn't be a surprise. But I'm going to start with Emily. So Emily, what are some ways that gardening and the creation of urban gardens can be presented to appeal to different age groups and people of different backgrounds?
I think that the act of growing food is fairly universal, and most people find it intriguing. And if they're not interested in getting their hands dirty, then they still like to purchase beautiful food often, or like they can appreciate the aesthetic value. So its existence is fairly, like, it's broadly engaging, I guess. But there's also, I've noticed that since now we have a farm and not just gardens, we have far more men involved, which I find really interesting. Like, very, very drastic change in the demographics once farm was added to what we were doing. And also younger people are attracted to the farm, and more families. So I think that there's our programs are run differently. They attract different types of people, but they're all places where food is being grown, and even in small spaces, it's just kind of like your room at Kafka. Like, you just can curate a garden space differently to attract and engage different people if you have the staff capacity and knowledge essentially to facilitate that, and put some thought into planning it as well, so it's usable as a community space. Yeah.
So what was done differently, because you mentioned that younger people, so men, when you suddenly added the word farm, so that brought men. So what do you think brought younger people and families out that weren't necessarily coming out before? So how would you attract those?
Yeah, so I think just urban farm is sexier than garden. So like that,
how you present it.
And it's like more tactile or something, I don't know. And then families, I think, have been attracted to the farm because it's a lot bigger space. And they've come to buy food, and then they see that there's volunteers and there's other kids, and my kids